Welcome to Tools for Time Traveling, the podcast equipping creators to build the future today. Because the future isn't something that just happens to you, it's built by creators of all stripes.
Every episode, we'll talk to a creative industry expert to get a behind the curtains look at the past and present of our creative industries, so you can gain that unfair advantage as you build out the future of your career. This season, we're focusing on music creators and providing strategic tools that help them navigate this often disrupted industry as they take control of their future.
All right, now let's jump into the episode. What's up, time travelers? Welcome back to Tools for Time Traveling, the podcast equipping creators to build the future today. I'm Gavin Guidry, creative director, champion of great content.
Yep, and I'm Desmond Dickerson, futurist and strategist and marketing leader, depending on the day.
Depending on the day. And today, like all other days, we are on a journey to figure out what's the future of creativity. And more specifically, in this first season, as you know, if you've been rocking with us so far, maybe this is your first time with us, we are focusing on the creative industry of music first, because it is so often disrupted. It is, often sort of like a harbinger of things to come. So we wanted to focus on music, focus on the innovation or lack thereof that we see in this industry, and talk to industry experts that could give us a look at the past and also a look at the present, so that we can determine where the near future is and how you, listeners, creators, creatives, can determine how we get to that future and really have a part to play in it. So normally we have a guest on these episodes, but today we actually wanted to take a step back, and before we continue to interview more really smart people, we want to draw connections and pull out insights from some of our past guests to continue to give you that unfair advantage, really just bring back some of those like greatest hits from our episodes so that we can draw connections between those to really get the ideas flowing. And so y'all can really get out there and start ideating. So today's episode is actually going to be all about products. I think this was a little bit surprising getting into talking to people and musicians and people in the music industry. I don't think we were, we were really ready to start talking about productization. That's not something that we were really looking forward to, but it had a ton of insight talking about productization and how that productization is potentially the antidote to commoditization.
Yes. So, with all the new technologies and new approaches that have emerged in this creator economy or digital economy, it's made music making easier than ever. There's less barriers to entry. Like anybody could just wake up and become a musician, right? But that deluge of content, it's also come with some drawbacks. And we talked to Mike Walbert. He is the VP of Experience at Rock the Bells. We talked to him about what happens when there's an overflow of musical output and instant access to all of it.
Music is commoditized right now, right? Like we don't think of it as a good that's worth any money. It's just something that lives in our pocket. Like you release music, I'm not paying you for it because why would I pay you for music? It's on my app. So how do you bring value back to music? And I think there's like really interesting ways of doing that with like the NFT space or ownership or making music valuable and tangible again.
Make music valuable again. That is officially now my favorite make blank blank again phrase. Because I do think it's really important, and something that like as consumers we're probably not even realizing that we are contributing to the devaluing of this art form that we love so much. But
are we though? Are we? Can you blame the consumer? I don't know, man.
I mean, supply and demand, ain't it?
Yeah. Okay.
if we weren't so ready to, if we weren't demanding it, they wouldn't keep supplying it to a certain degree. I think obviously there's multiple culprits in this situation of how we've gotten here. But I think you explained it well earlier, where it's not only so easy to consume, but it's so easy to make that people sort of like devalue it, right? You think something that is really valuable is really hard to make, but as we'll talk about later, there's really things like scarcity that actually make things really valuable. So even though something is really easy to make, doesn't mean it's not valuable. We talked about that before. So music to this point, because it's so easy to listen to, pull up, I got it pulled up on my phone. I've got so many different ways to listen to it. I don't even feel like I'm paying for it, because I'm just paying, $10.99, $12.99, whatever it is, to a streaming platform. It's sort of deeply commoditized music to the point of where we just consider it a commoditized product. But I think in the conversations that we have, or that we've had, there's a need for a sort of like paradigm shift on how music is experienced to make it more valuable and even more tangible. And I think that's where productization comes in, where we can now, instead of only making music, we can make products that are adjacent to the music, adjacent to the music listening experience, in order to bring that value back to music.
And I want to pause right here just to make sure we're all on the same page, right? Because we keep saying like productize or productization. And what does that even mean, right? So productizing something, it involves taking a skill or a service that's been used often internally at a particular business, or it's been used in one particular content. It's been used in one particular context, and then developing it into like a standard, fully tested, repackaged, like marketed product elsewhere, right? So, that could be used in the business world, in the consulting world, where a consultant might productize their expertise and, go from like, oh, I have this expertise and I share it with my clients, project to project. And now I'm putting it together in a book, or I'm putting it together in a workshop that I will then sell to other people. I have now productized my knowledge, right? So what Mike and some of our other guests were talking through is, how might we productize musical services?
Yeah, and I think a great example, and we'll hear from Wes later on, but is Wes Pendleton. So he is producer. He's a musician. He's a trained musician. Got into music producing. Made a living there. Was able to sustain himself there. But he ended up actually taking his art form of being a music producer and brought that into creating libraries of sound that he was able to sell to a parent company. And now he's able to eat off of making music products. So that, I think that goes to show that for musicians and music creators and artists, it would be game changing to make new ways to experience your music that still maintain the ease of access while increasing the value of that art form, of your music, of your content.
Yeah, absolutely. And, before we get into what Wes had to say, we got a couple other experts that we talked to about it. And Panos Panay is one of them. He's the president of the Recording Academy. And he's no stranger to music industry products. The way he really, broke in and had, not necessarily broke in, but the way he had a huge level up in his prowess and business acumen in the music industry is that he launched his own startup. It was called Sonic Bids, and it was all about this
if new
digital platform.
Yeah, Sonic Bids, man. If you know, you know.
This new digital platform to help artists and venues book talent online. So with that expertise, we wanted to chat with him and hear what he had to say about tokenization and the new internet, and how that can play a role in adding value back to music.
I'll use the word tokenization, and this could include both fungible and non-fungible tokens. On the non-fungible token side, or so-called NFTs, I'm excited about the prospect that for the first time since the advent of the digital era, we have the ability as creators to release our creations in limited supply. And this harkens back to an analog era, right? I'm old enough to have picture discs and have limited edition copies of discs. There's something organic about it that appeals to us as people when things are in limited supply. And there's something extremely inorganic and distant and clinical about things that are available to us in abundant supply, the way that the internet does. So I'm excited about not just the monetization elements of what NFTs provide, but more importantly, the kinds of inspiration and imagination that it can unlock for people with respect to new experiences that can be created using this media that involve both sonic and visual expressions. On the fungible token side, I'm excited about the prospect of tokenization of assets that musicians have, whether those are publishing catalogs, whether those are experiences, clubs, and the ability for the first time to create platforms that incentivize your most ardent fans to go out there and promote music and become stakeholders ultimately as you grow your own value. And they are, in many ways, shareholders, if you will, or token holders that have a stake into your future potential, but they're actively participating both with respect to their promotional abilities, if you will, as well as financially into that future. All this will forever change the connection between creators and audiences, but it's also blurring the edges between creators and audiences. Audiences are becoming creators. Creators should be audiences and be listening to what their fans are doing. So you can imagine in a not too distant future, these worlds of limited edition assets, communities that are incentivized through tokenizations, the merging of applications from the gaming industry, such as collectibles, really unleashing a whole new future for where this industry is going.
Okay, so I know the look that, people always give when you start talking about NFTs, and
I'm one of them for sure.
Yeah,
the skepticism.
Yeah, for sure. A very skeptical look, which, I think some of that is deserved, but I do think even just theoretically, it's in the name. Non-fungible token means something that is one of one, right? So that means it's scarce. You're releasing things in limited runs. We don't have to go into Web3 to know that works, right? Supreme. We know that works with the Supreme model, the drops era. You know what I mean? In fashion, to know that it's a successful model in sustaining relevance and hype. You know what I mean? So in talking before, and how can we make music valuable again? Yeah. I think there's obviously an element of creating products, but really when you create products, you can start to think about scarcity and how many of those products you release. So I think that it would be great for us to think, instead of releasing like an MP3, right, to a streaming platform, which there's no scarcity there. There's also no product in that. We can start to think about, how do I go from an MP3 to something that's like a collectible, something that will run out once enough people listen to it, something that people are going to seek to flip and to find out and clamor to as a way to get their hands on. I think we think of NFTs as something that is, a crypto bro is going to make a monkey, and that's the only way that you could get into Gary V's new sushi restaurant. But
I don't even know what you just said, bro. Like, what?
I just combined like 5 different things.
All right.
But I think we were surprised to notice that tokenization could make fans more invested in your musical output of their favorite artists, if you're figuring out how to take that music and make it into a scarce product.
Yeah. It's interesting, man, and it just starts. There's so much things that I'm curious about as I learn more about this. And my boy John
Well, so
King, he. Oh, go ahead.
no, sorry, and I hate to interrupt there, but I will say that it's not just the NFTs. He also talked about the fungible tokens as well, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be the crypto and things like that. There's other ways to tokenize and productize your music that doesn't have to be a Bored Ape.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I was gonna talk about my boy John King, and he works in the crypto space, and has one of those Bored Apes, and we go back and forth. He tries to argue me down like, yo, this is the future, man, and I give him a hard time, but there are some possible implications, some things that can emerge here, and as we're talking through this conversation, these insights from Panos, we do start to think, what if this kind of tokenized output or tokenized approach, like what if this could make music more valuable, at least for those super fans that are like, yo, this song is only available in limited quantities. I want to be one of the folks that can listen to it, and maybe it's over a short time period where it's a new album, and the first 100 people to make a purchase, they're able to listen to it for a week before everyone else has access, or whatever people decide. Even an hour, even 6 hours, that could be valuable for those folks that just, want to be ahead of the curve, want to have their IG captions popping off with the latest lyrics before anyone else has them. It's something to really think about there. And it could be, revolutionary for artists to fully understand how they can start to tokenize their creative output, not just with music, but like anything they're doing creatively.
Okay, so this conversation around scarcity, limited edition, limited availability, increasing hype and fervor, and giving something to your most ardent and most dedicated fans doesn't not only apply to NFTs and Web3 and all that stuff. We talked with Bosco as well about how things that you create and the ways in which you present and package your music can not only provide that same sort of like limited edition feel, but also bring a little bit of tangibility back to your content offering as well.
I'm really appreciating the hi-fi lo-fi movement right now. Not in the perspective of sampling and taking of the record, but more so exploring the soundscapes and textures of records and the authenticity of the sound quality of things versus just like frequency and compression. I think they're doing like a really like good job of educating people, but also just using a whole different thought process of take like taking the appreciation and anatomy of a record and not just be like, oh yeah, this is cool, like whatever streaming. I'm seeing, honestly, maybe it's just in my world, I see less streaming happening. I know this, don't just trust me, okay? People are really gonna start getting back into tapes, CDs, and vinyls because the hi-fi lo-fi movement is really coming from, overseas and just sweeping over here right now, and I'm so stoked about it. So excited about it.
Can you describe the hi-fi lo-fi movement? I think I know what you're talking about, but
Uh-huh.
I don't but like exactly, because like obviously hi-fi we're talking about high fidelity, so like vinyl
Uh-huh.
and tape and like
Uh-huh.
even CD and stuff like that. But then what's the lo-fi part of it?
More like the tapes. So you'll have
Okay.
like a Kai, you'll have like I can't think of the other brand, these like consoles of listening to the music on those frequencies. And then you have the more lo-fi, which is like the Panasonics, the Sonys, the things like that. So the more like European, Asia influence is more hi-fi. And then you have the Americanized thing, the Americanized retro audio hardware, like players and stuff like that. Even I saw a really great hi-fi system at Little Trouble. I don't know if you've been
Mm-hmm.
there recently, but they have a good little setup that's happening there. And then I know Key is opening a hi-fi bar, and yeah, I'm excited to see.
Big
Yeah,
guy.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So two, I think it's two bedroom or two console bedroom. So she's black owned, black queer woman. It's opening a hi-fi bar, and I think that's gonna be really tight.
So I'm glad we got to talk to her because this really wasn't on my radar at all. So it was just interesting to
Mm,
learn from her what's going on in this space, like this kind of hi-fi
yeah.
versus lo-fi movement, and particularly how like foreign music markets are really shaping what's going on
Hmm.
here, and the possibility that that could lead to less streaming and these different just rituals or habits where the streaming of music isn't as emphasized, but maybe like
Yeah.
the physical, tangible products that the music comes on becomes like
Yeah.
a part of our everyday experience again.
Yeah. I think it was really surprising to hear her describe, going back to tapes and vinyls as
Hmm.
something that we're moving back to. Obviously it's something that's somewhat of a trend right now. I think
Yeah.
most people probably have, gotten record players and are listening to old records and things like that. But I wouldn't say that's necessarily mainstream, so I think it is interesting to think about that as somewhere where the world could be going.
Yeah.
And
Let,
also
let me
that
ask you
leading
though,
to less streaming in the future.
before you even move on to that, I know
Hmm.
you have like a nice record player at the house. You got a nice collection that you're building up. What is drawing you to that, and what might we learn about the future of
Mm.
music just based on anecdotally, like your draw there.
So I think there's a couple of things. One, it feels so tangible, right? It
Mm,
feels like I am engaging with not just the music, but the musician, right? Like I'm
mm,
able to feel a little bit more of where they're coming from. It's like going back and listening to a CD back in the day. You would thumb through the book that came in the CD.
yeah.
It's a similar thing to a record player, or sorry, to a vinyl. I think also with listening to sort of like an analog setup, you have to be so intentional about the way it sounds, the way that you set it up. You can't just click play. You have to make sure things are balanced. You have to make sure things are hooked up. You have to
Mm,
make sure that things are EQ'd correctly. You know what I mean? And
yeah.
that makes it so that like I can't passively do that. You know what I mean? I can't passively go sit and listen to a record. That's
Hmm.
something that I have to actively be doing, actively being engaging in that experience. And thus, I'm actively engaging in the message that creator, that musician, that artist was trying to impart to me through their music.
Yeah.
And then, I think what that does too is like as I've started to and anyone who has gotten more into listening to things in a more analog, more traditional way, more intentional way, they've also started to educate themselves about
Mm,
different things, about the art form, about the journey that person went on to get this music offering to them. And
yeah.
so I think that innately takes something that is commoditized and just in my pocket, and somebody sent me a link. All I did was I didn't even there's been times where I forgot artists' names because I never even looked them up myself. I just
Wow.
clicked a link from something and I
Yeah.
was like, "Oh, that song is cool." And I don't even know how to go back and find it because I
Mm,
never searched it to begin with. So I think
hmm.
when we're talking about the hi-fi lo-fi movement, the reintroduction of cassettes and vinyls and listening lounges and stuff like that, you you are bringing value back to the content because you are upping the level of like education and
Mm,
intentionality it takes to really consume that content, right? So we talked with Bosco a lot about, oh, I think musicians are a little bit anxious about the transition to becoming a creator because they're sacrificing some part of
yeah.
their artistic integrity. But when we think about artists becoming product makers and and creators of
Hmm.
products, we're essentially talking about a way that we're not sacrificing, we're actually upping the level of engagement that it takes to consume my art form.
Yeah.
So, I think it would really be revolutionary. It would be game changing to, instead of only focusing on the music and the art form, we also focus on the products that upgrade the lo-fi streaming experience to a hi-fi listening experience.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. We were talking about this, I think it was last year, about how you've got a music streaming service and you couldn't wait to listen to the Kendrick album, but what would be even more valuable is if there was like a product or a service that allowed you to like host some sort of listening session, with a group of friends in advance of the album dropping or something like that. And I love what you were saying earlier in some of those conversations around like, if people didn't just drop albums, but they drop products that you use to listen to the album, or products that built an experience around that album.
Yeah, exactly. We've seen it done with people who release kits, and that kit comes with a vinyl, and it comes with, all of these different things.
Yeah.
So I think that's where the future is going, right? Where, again, we are uncommoditizing. We're making music valuable again in that way.
Yeah.
And then I think even, again, something that we have seen already, but something that I think is even maybe further into the future is, like a stem player by Redacted. I'm not, we're not mentioning the name. We're not going to get deplatformed. But that is a peek into the future. I think when you're saying, I'm not dropping an album, I'm dropping the way you're going to listen to my album, and my album's going to be on there, and you can listen to other albums on there. But I'm going to make sure that when you get my music, it's listened to, it's consumed in the way in which I created it, right?
Yeah.
That, to me, is how you bring value back to music. And I think when you think of it that way, so let's take the stem player example. You're then able to charge not for a song, because people have it made up in their mind what they're going to pay for a song. Nobody's going to pay more than $10.99, and that's the absolute max, right? $9.99, $10.99, whatever, to consume your music, because they can just go onto a streaming platform and listen to it for the amount of money that they're already paying to listen to all of the other music that's already out there in the world. But people will pay if it's scarce and if it's tangible. People will pay a certain amount of money to have access to that scarce and tangible product. So when we look at things that way, we go from scarcity and tangibility to also opening up the door to more revenue streams when you are creating products instead of just the music.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that brings us back to kind of what we were talking about early on with Wes Pendleton and, some of his ideas around, just kind of unchaining yourself from some of the limitations that are placed on creators, particularly music creators, and how, products and productizing your art or your skill set or your talent can really open up those doors.
When you're younger, you seem to be totally fine with exchanging your time for money. And I was getting closer to 40 and I was like, I need to create a product that makes me money when I'm not actually doing anything. Like when I'm sitting watching the Dubs and the Celtics play from 9 to 11:30 at night, I want to make like $100. And this is another thing. It's like, this is a thing that, our communities don't understand. Being able to build something that makes money for you where you're not putting in a whole lot of work. This is how every other ethnicity is able to grow wealth exponentially in this country, whether that's through owning a few small businesses, whether that's through having enough capital to be able to buy real estate and get into different types of investments. Products is the fastest way, a product that you can create one time and it can sell tens and thousands and hundreds of thousands of times is the quickest way to get there.
So one of the really interesting things that emerged out of our conversation with Wes was this time for money paradox that you know, he kind of put into words. We all experience it. We all face that, right? Like you show up to your job, you know, 9 to 5, you're exchanging your time for the money that they will pay you, right? And you take that to the extreme with musicians, right? They've made a cash cow out of touring, but that also is an exchange of time for money. They have to put all the time and effort into rehearsals and, you know, planning and practice and, you know, hiring a band and all of that. And then after all that prep work, they have to actually go out on the road and tour for months at a time. So, you know, exchanging their money for time. But what Wes is getting at is that when you start to productize your talents, your skills, your expertise, you're able to, you know, reclaim your time, as the people like to say.
Yeah.
Whereas it's a product based on your art, a product based on your intellectual property that can continue to, you know, bring in revenue for you and kind of, you know, it can help offset or like, you know, get you out of that time for money paradox.
Yeah, it's kind of like a cheat code in a way.
Yeah.
Because like, you know, if this does mean that streaming isn't the only outcome of your music and touring isn't the only way to make money off of that music, then, you know, creating a product and circumventing that time for money paradox is kind of like a way to cheat the system, you know, if you can find, not to say that it's easy, but, you know, I think it does maybe become a way that we can bring more value back to the music, bring more scarcity, bring more tangibility to the music, and also bring more money to the music because you are creating the ways you're creating something once and you're letting people buy that over and over and over again for more than a few pennies on the stream. So I think it would really be game changing if artists considered music products in addition to music creation, even as a new revenue stream.
And as you mentioned that, it also makes me think of like something to kind of build on or something adjacent to that is how interesting would it be to see, you know, musicians themselves or artists start to embrace maybe the VC model a little bit, where it's like, hey, I want to talk to, you know, 10 potential, you know, technologists or entrepreneurs or whatever. And it's like, I want you to pitch me on products around my music. Like, and each artist has their own little incubator where they've got like, you know, 5 to 10 different business ideas, different productization ideas around their musical output or their artistic output. And it's like, hey, maybe 2 of them work and it makes them like millions of dollars, and they share that with their, you know, their innovators or their startup crew or whatever. And then the other ideas, they learn from it. Maybe they pitch it to other artists because it's better for them. Yeah. Or, you know, they just kind of take those learnings into the next round of things that they're ideating around.
Yeah. Yeah. Or at the very least, it's content, you know what I mean? So
That's true too.
I think that's really smart. So like, going away from like, oh, I'm a label, I'm an incubator, you know what I mean? I'm a product incubator. I'm gonna put these, you know, the new making the band is I'm gonna put these musicians into a house and we're gonna see what products they come up with, you know, not what songs they're gonna make, but like what products they're gonna make and how they're gonna make new experiences off of that music that they're making.
That you saying that like unlocked a memory for me. Dame Dash had a TV show that was like kind of based around this premise, and it was like who's the best hip hop hustler or something like that, right? So instead of making a band, he was like hiring or bringing on these people for their like business acumen, right? And I remember this. So this show, this was like, it had to have been like 15, 20 years ago. This is a very long time. And I remember there was a young lady on there and she was like, yeah, like I'm the digital diva. And like her thing was being like really like up on like digital technologies and processes in as it relates to like music and like the hip hop genre at the time, which, you know, 15, 20 years ago, that was very like groundbreaking and new. Yeah. So now I got to pull up the clip, man, because it was really interesting to see how he was like, yo, who's the hustler? Who can make money off of this stuff that's not just like a rapper themselves or a musician themselves?
Yeah, I mean that's really dope. Not the first time we've brought up Dame Dash on this show, but
he's a futurist,
you know,
fam.
He's a futurist for sure. So I think, you know, just taking that mindset and thinking how we go beyond the music into creating something one time that's going to provide the scarcity, the tangibility, and the revenue, unlike what you can get from just making the music solely.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I think, like, talking to Wes as well, he talked with us a little bit about how in music, and like, if we want to make music products, he was saying that, like, to him, the well is a little bit dry. Music is maybe a bit of an oversaturated market when it comes to products that can be made. So I think that just gives a little bit more credence to, if you do want to take this lane of starting to turn your creative output into products. If you want to go from producer to productizer, if you will, then maybe it's taking some of those insights from that we said before, and thinking more as a general creator, not as just a musician. You know what I mean? So music-based creators, again, should shift their focus to being general creators to find more opportunities to productize.
Yeah. And, as we said to kick things off, the future of music is figuring out ways to productize your art, productize your intelligence, your services, your skill set related to music, to find new business models, new revenue streams. And, this whole conversation started with, talking to Mike Walbert and what he was saying about music essentially becoming a commodity. And, the issue that we face there is that it's so easy to make, it's so easy to put it out there, it's so easy to share, that it's lost value in some ways, right? So, of course, from that, we chatted a little bit with Panos about tokenization and how some of those emerging technologies, they kind of build in a scarcity into these digital products or into this art and music that is otherwise widely available. But when you do that, when you limit the access to it, inherently, each access point with the music and with the art becomes more valuable. And even outside of the digital realm, we talked to Bosco to understand, hey, generating value around your music and kind of productizing that, it doesn't have to be digital goods. It can be physical things. Maybe it's vinyls, or maybe it's actual, live experiences, as she was saying about going to a listening bar where there's this very high quality listening experience, but also this just communal element that you want to pay money for. You want to be, in that space and experiencing what's going on there. And then, we brought it all back to Wes Pendleton and everything he's been doing with productizing his art, and just the premise around the fact that, what might be game changing is if artists put as much effort and thought and creativity into productizing their talents as much as they do into the music itself, right? And figuring out, hey, if streaming essentially becomes the lost leader, or streaming essentially becomes, just marketing for everything else you do, maybe there's a need to double down on productizing, other things, other elements of your musical output. And, maybe that results in some artists even, putting together little business incubators around their talents, around their creativity, and ultimately what matters most, as Gavin was saying, is that, we think that music makers, should continue to embrace shifting their focus to being, more generally creators, and how that can find new opportunities for them as they look to, gain value in their music and also just productize that music in general.
Yeah. So yeah, we would love to hear what you all think. Is productization a way forward to bring more innovation to the record industry, the music industry? Do we see that as a viable way forward for creators, for labels, whatever that may be? We would love to hear from you. If you're on Spotify, you can scroll down. We've got some Q&As that you can engage with. On YouTube, of course, you could just leave a comment. And let us know, again, what are those ways that you're seeing products start to form from music, or what are some of those ways that we can introduce a little bit more of that in the future? Also, just a little bit of housekeeping. We would love if you checked us out on Spotify, on YouTube, and you liked, followed, subscribed. That's great for us to just know that you guys are listening. You're liking what we're saying. Share it around, if you will, and definitely follow us on Instagram at Tools for Time Traveling, so you can see some of the clips that we're sharing. share some of the clips that we're sharing. Check when we have new episodes coming out, or when we're just, sharing some cool stuff. But yeah, that's been our time today. Thank you for listening. And let's gear up to build the future that we want to see.
All right. Peace.
Peace.